I'm Howard Glitsman. I'm a physician. I'm actually had a practice in Spring Hill for 20 years, so this is my old. I used to work for Hernando Pascal Hospice. I used to see people at the Rowan Center in the past. So we live down in Bradenton now, and my co-author is Steve Laufmann. He's an enterprise architect. He's sort of an IT engineer, but I'll let him explain what he does. But both of us wrote this book. It's called Your Design Body. And it's a systems view of life. So like Rabbi was saying, we sort of go through how the body works. One could ask, well, what's the thesis of the book? And the simple answer is, God created you, get over it. But the longer answer really is that once you understand not only how life looks, but how it actually, what it takes for it to work and what it took to build it in the first place, you realize that Darwin was totally wrong. The laws of nature actually don't cause life, they actually cause death. Unless life comes up with some innovations to solve the problem for life. So life has to solve a lot of hard problems. Those are things that engineers deal with a lot. Physicians don't deal with it. We sort of do reverse engineering, try to figure out what's wrong with the patient and try to help them, but we don't actually make things. This is why a good combination of a physician and engineer writing this book is very helpful. There's a lot of hard problems to solve, and all of human experience teaches that the only type of people that can solve those problems are engineers, or our engineers basically are a master engineer when you look at the body. So in other words, in Psalm 139, where it says we've been fearfully, wonderfully made, right? That's the truth, right? We're not a cosmic accident. We've all been created for a purpose. So let me just begin by giving you sort of a quick overview of the book, how we deal with this. There's three perspectives. We have three perspectives. We look in this book that you see. Oh, it's not in there, but this is the book here. Okay. There's a medical perspective, there's an engineering perspective, and then at the end we look at the causation, where this all comes from. So the medical perspective, first part looks at control mechanisms. Basically, we call it the Goldilocks principle. Everything has to be just right, all right? So things that we look at are like chemical parameters, like you have to have enough oxygen, right? You can't have too much carbon dioxide. You have to have the right amount of water, right amount of sugar, right? Salt, calcium, etc. And the key thing to notice here is if any one of these is wrong, out of whack, you're dead, okay? Any one. Then we move on to physiological parameters. So you're all familiar with these things because when you go see the doctor, they do the vital signs, right? They check your temperature. Why bother with that? Well, if it's too high or too low, you can die, right? Your blood pressure, respiratory rate, heart rate, etc. We look at dynamic capacities such as regional blood flow. So in other words, you can have the blood flowing all over the body, but if it's not going where it's supposed to go, we got problems, right? Clotting mechanism in the body, right? If you don't clot where you're supposed to clot, if you clot where you're not supposed to clot, it's not a good job. You got not in good shape. Same with the immune system. You want it to turn on when it's supposed to turn on and turn off and stay off when it's supposed to stay off. How does the body control that, right? It's all in the book. Then we look at, this is all part of the book, special senses. We look at how vision works, how hearing works, balance of movement, and then we look at reproduction and development. We look at fertility and then the zygote to the newborn. So that's the medical perspective. Then we have the engineering perspective, which is basically saying, well, how do you make all this happen? And it turns out, as we've said, you have to solve a lot of hard problems to do that. And it ends up you need to have what's called coherent interdependent systems to make it all work right. So what that means is you have to have a system in place which consists of many parts, and if any one part is missing or not working properly, you see the doctor. No, if one system or one part isn't working, it all falls apart, doesn't work properly, okay? Another part, and that's the coherent part of the system. The interdependent part of the system, and I'll give you an example, is your lungs bring in oxygen, right? But the lung cells, they also need sugar, so you got to get the sugar from the GI system, right? And they both of those, the GI system and the lung systems, need the cardiovascular system, so they're all interdependent. The cells that line the blood vessels and the heart, that's what they do for a living, if you will. But they've also got to get the oxygen from the lungs, and they've got to get the sugar from the GI system. So all three systems are independent on each other. You can't have one. All three have to be in place at the same time. And so then, because you have to have coherent independent systems, the point about it is what we talk about is we explain how do you actually design build, launch, maintain, and reproduce coherent independent systems, right? Because don't forget, if all this is developing over time, this was the Darwin thinking, gradualism, right? The system, the organism has to be alive every step along the way, right? You've just shown that it falls apart if one thing is missing. There's no way it can develop. This is sort of the basis of what we talk about. So then we get into causation. Well, how did all this happen, all right? So what I forgot to mention earlier on is the reason why we wrote this book, right, is to educate everyone, especially the young people, about how life really works, and to them to understand that they have been created, and so they don't fall, so they can defend themselves from this error of the culture, from science, and from the media, right? So the problem is that unless you have this information in hand, right, you don't even know what to ask. So by reading the book and understanding how all these systems work, then you can ask better questions. We'll hope we get better answers. And at the end of the book, there's an actual section on where we compare neo-Darwinism to what we present as what's called a theory of biological design, because there's basically only two options on the table: either it's materialism, or it's been designed. There's a mind at work that's been doing this. Just going to skip through here. Sorry. So what we're going to look at here is, I'm going to step into what's in the book here. We'll get into the cells. Of course, as you know, the basic building block of the body is the cell, right? And if it's a single cell organism like an amoeba, right, it's very easy they're sort of like islands of life, because they're in water and they can get what they need and get rid of what they don't need from the water outside, right? But if you have a multicellular organism like us, has 30 plus trillion cells, that's like an organism that's like a big continent. Most of the cells are not near the exterior. So how are those cells going to get their oxygen? How are they going to get their water? How are they going to get their sugar? They can't, in the one-celled organism, they get it right from the water they're at. So the scope of the problem, this is why we have all these systems in our body. And we've already alluded to that. You've got we've got the digestive system, which brings in all your chemicals in the body except oxygen, right? And cardiovascular system pumps everything around, right? The skin protects you. We got the respiratory system, brings in oxygen, right? And all the other systems that we have there. So what we want to do is, when I wanted to give you a quick example of how complicated this is, we're going to solve just one problem, one out of a million problems that your body has to solve all the time. And so as an engineer, the most important chemical in your body, the fastest way you die is if you stop breathing, right? Right? That's because your body doesn't store oxygen. It stores water, and you can go about 10 days without drinking getting new supplies of water. You can go several weeks without taking in new food, new calories, because the body can store it. The calories for sugar, I understand, and fat you can store quite a bit of. But oxygen, you only got 4 minutes, right? So if you're a good engineer and you're trying to build this body, right, the first job you got to do is you have to make sure that you're not only getting enough oxygen to all the cells, you have to do it all the time, right? So how do you solve that problem? So I want everyone to sort of just for a few seconds, hold your breath. Let's hold our breath for a second. Well, we could be here a while. What are you feeling? Did you feel something?
Panic to breathe again.
Yeah, something's telling you to breathe, right? So you got this control system in the body. What happened after you took the breath? That went away, right? So let's walk through basically what just happened, what you went through here. So you have a respiratory system. So in order to solve this problem, first we're going to try to solve this problem. Remember, we're trying to get oxygen to all the cells in your body, right? So the first thing you need to do is you have to have a platform to bring that oxygen. You got to get into the body somehow, right? So you got the respiratory system. There's all these parts here, but basically you have airways, the nose, the mouth, the trachea, the bronchi, the bronchioles, okay? And they have to bring the air in. You've got don't forget that this is structured through the chest wall. You have the ribs and you have the sternum in front. You can't see that, and the thoracic spine behind. Then you have the soft tissue and you have the connective tissue. This is all part of your lungs. If you don't have any parts of those, you don't have lungs, right? Below this, you have a muscle called the diaphragm, and you have they have muscles in between the ribs called intercostal ribs. It's a good name for them, intercostal. And then the air comes down. The organ of the lung is called the alveoli, these little grape-like sacs at the end of the airways, and that's where when the oxygen comes in, it then goes in through into the capillaries, all right? And that's how the oxygen gets into your blood. So when you're holding your breath and you took that breath, right, the air came down in here, came through into these alveoli, and then it went into your bloodstream. Now, but what was telling you to breathe? Because obviously you've got this system, but now you have to be able to control it. Oh. So it ends up that basically oxygen and also carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion control your breathing, but you actually have what's called chemoreceptors, and that's a fancy word for saying it's a sensor that detects oxygen or chemicals. In your main arteries, going up through your neck, up towards your brain, you have oxygen sensors. They actually detect oxygen. They also detect carbon dioxide. And inside the brain, they call the central chemoreceptors, you have sensors for carbon dioxide. Now, sensors aren't very useless unless they send it to an area logic center that knows what to do with it, right? So that information is sent to the brainstem, called the respiratory center in your brain, that is always monitoring your oxygen and carbon dioxide sensors levels. So when you're holding your breath, right, your cells are always using up oxygen, and they make carbon dioxide when they do that. So while you were holding your breath there, what happened? The oxygen level started to drop down a little bit because you're not taking any more breath, and the carbon dioxide level started to rise. And the respiratory center says, Houston, we got a problem. We got to solve this problem. You better take a breath. But of course, we can wait a little longer and longer, and you notice that urge gets worse, right? You really got to take that breath. And once you do that, then it sends messages along nerves that tells your muscles of respiration to contract, your lungs open up, and you breathe in air. Okay, and the air goes into your bloodstream, as I said. So that's one part to consider respiratory control. But as a physician, one of the things you want to ask is, well, how much oxygen do you need? It's like a car, right? You got the car idling there. How much oxygen, how much gas do you need to go 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour? I mean, so when you're sitting, you're doing things, you're sitting there, then you go out and work, or you start running around or doing stuff, you have to have a certain amount of oxygen, right? So in medicine, we happen to have, I'm not going to go too much into this, but just to show you the numbers, we actually have the numbers. We know how much oxygen your body uses when you're at rest. When you're lying in bed at night sleeping, at complete rest, you need 250 milliliters of oxygen per minute. You so slow walking, it doubles, quadruples for fast walking, jogging. This is the critical number, though, to keep in mind, because when we're talking about Darwin, because survival mode oxygen, you need 3,500 milliliters per minute of oxygen to be able to run really quickly. So that would be either eating or being eaten, okay? Preying on others or being preyed upon. If you're out there, out in the wild, and you're running around trying to, catch your food, right? This is what our ancient ancestors would have had to be able. We know this, right? This is how much oxygen they would have had to be able to bring into their body, right? But if that's the case, the next question becomes, well, lung functional parameters. So if you have to bring in a certain amount of oxygen per minute to be able to survive, you have to have certain parameters. You have to, the lungs have to be big enough, right? The air has to be moved fast enough. And so we know those as well. And the gas exchange has to be fast enough. So we actually have numbers. Won't detail too much in this, but basically we know what the normal volume capacity. So there's something called pulmonary function tests. Maybe some of you have had them. If you did, it meant you probably had a lung problem, which isn't a good thing. But we know what normal is. If you take a big breath in as much as you can and breathe out, it's about 4 or 5 liters. That's your maximum breath you can take. And then the speed of that air is about 80% of that. And once it gets into the alveoli, then 100% exchange occurs. So as an example, you could have the biggest lungs in the world and the air moving very quickly, but if it doesn't pass through the gas exchange, some people get what's called pulmonary fibrosis. When the alveoli are scarred and inflamed, you're going to have a problem. You're going to be short of breath. By the same token, this could be working fine, and the airway's moving quickly, but your lungs are small, right? Or you have the opposite. You got big lungs, you got great exchange, but there's obstruction in the airways, and we see this a lot with smokers. So the bottom line to all of this is all 3 of these numbers have to be normal for you to do maximum activity survival. Okay. So where did this all come from? That's the whole question, right? How does the body, where is the body plan? Where is the information that says that the lungs have to be able to be this size, move air that fast, and how many alveoli there are, never mind the exchange. So let me just, so all the parts have to be in the right, just forget the term here, we're not going to get defined that, but all the parts have to be in the right place, right? We need answers to these questions, right? And you notice here that the sensors, they also have to be in the right place. If you notice, they're right in the main arteries going up to your brain. That's exactly where the arterial blood is going. They're not sitting in the veins. They're not sitting in my co-author's favorite organ, the spleen. He loves to talk about the spleen, the liver. They're exactly where they need to be. Isn't that interesting? Okay. And here's another important point. So after they detect the oxygen and carbon dioxide center level, they send it to the brainstem. They send it, to the respiratory center. They don't send it to your visual cortex. They don't send it to your hearing cortex. They actually send it to the part of the brain that knows what it's supposed to do about this problem, right? And then when the respiratory center says, hey, you got a problem, you got to breathe, it doesn't tell you get up and do a dance. It could turn on any muscle in your body, but it turns on your muscles of respiration, right? So this is engineering. This is how it's all control systems are set up. Now we're only talking about oxygen. Don't forget here, right? This is all we're dealing with. Now the other thing that's very important is, well, as we already commented, in order for this to work, as we discussed, the chest cavity and the lungs, they have to be big enough. The lungs have to be compliant. In other words, when the air comes in, they have to open up, but then they have to be elastic enough to go back out, so you breathe well enough. The airways have to be wide and open enough. The muscles of respiration have to be strong enough. The alveoli and the capillaries, they have to have proper gas exchange. And as we said, the respiratory center needs to know what to do, when, and how fast to do it. Okay, so we're now near the end of the cascading, for my part, about cascading problems, because now this is an engineering problem. Remember, let's go back to what we were supposed to accomplish. The job was to get enough oxygen to all the cells in your body all the time, okay? Have we done that? No, what have we done? We've only got the oxygen in from the air to the blood, right? So now we got to get that to the rest of the body, right? So this is where, remember we said I said at the beginning, there's a lot of hard problems that life has to deal with. So we got a problem here, right? The problem is that oxygen doesn't dissolve very well in water. So blood consists of cells and water. So when the oxygen comes in from the lungs, some of it actually does get dissolved in the serum or plasma, the fluid of your blood, right? But it's very, very low. It's so low that you wouldn't, remember I showed you those numbers, 250 milliliters per minute at rest? You would only have 6. Okay? No, actually, I'm sorry. You would have 15. I'm sorry, 6% of that. And for activity, you'd only have 2% of that. So there's no way. If that was the only way that you could carry oxygen in your blood, you'd be dead, right? So we had to come up with a new innovation. Remember we talked about these innovations, right? What's the answer? Hemoglobin. All right, so to have a better way to transport oxygen, you need hemoglobin. Now, hemoglobin is a very complex molecule that has iron in it, and it's made in red blood cells that come from your bone marrow, right? And so the bone marrow makes these red blood cells. Red cells go into your blood. They've got iron in it, and they pick up the oxygen when it comes in at the alveoli, and they carry the oxygen. That's why, if you may know, that blood, when it's red, it's full of oxygen. When it's blue, the stuff on your veins in the back, has a lot less oxygen, all right? So, but we got a problem. Remember I just said you need to have, let's see, 250 milliliters per minute of oxygen at rest and 3,500 with activity. So if we've actually got a number that says this is how much we need, then there must be a limit, there must be a certain amount of hemoglobin we need. Hemoglobin now everything has to be controlled in the body, right? How do you control the hemoglobin? Okay, well, it ends up that you have cells in your kidneys that monitor the oxygen, and they send out a hormone called erythropoietin. It's a very fancy hormone. Some of you may have had it or are familiar with family members who've had it. If they've had sort of anemia, leukemia, if you have kidney problems, they usually give this as a shot. So, but the way the body works is you've got a hormone in your kidney, right, that actually goes in the bloodstream and goes to the bone marrow, and it tells it to make red blood cells so you got enough hemoglobin. So there's another factor. So we have to have hemoglobin, and we have to control the hemoglobin through the kidney cells. So this is getting pretty complicated. You're keeping track of this? All right, then we got another problem, right? Don't forget, hemoglobin has iron in it, right? Where are you going to get the iron from? Iron has to come in through the GI system, right? There's a problem we got, another problem, right? Little too much iron is toxic for the body. You die, all right? So you got to control the iron, right? So that's another. So Yeah, too much. So the way the body deals with this is related to the liver. It ends up, and by the way the liver controls iron in the body, we've only known this for 25 years. So technically, the Darwinists, it doesn't matter what you come up with, we're told it was evolved. Now, how can you know something evolved if you don't even know it exists or how it works? You already know it in advance, right? That's ideology, that's not science, okay? If you know that no matter what I show you that's new, it evolved, you don't mind if I explain to you what it does and how it works and all that? No, we don't need to know this. We know it evolved already, okay? That's what we're facing. So at the end of the day, though, you have to get enough blood with enough hemoglobin, with enough iron to carry enough oxygen, no matter the body's activity level, to where it's needed fast enough all the time. So remember we said you want to get enough oxygen throughout the body to all the cells, but you have to give them what they need. So you notice if you're sitting around, your heart's going pretty slowly, you're okay, you're breathing fine. You start running, or maybe not all of us start running here, but you start moving quick, or you get excited. What happens? The heart beats faster, you breathe faster, right? That's turned on by, this is called the autonomic nervous system. That's where you got epinephrine or norepinephrine, you have like adrenaline. So you got hormones, neurohormones in your body that the brain knows what's going on, and it automatically turns this on for you to be active. So that's another part of this. Are we keeping track here? Like 5, 6, 7 different, what we call cascading problems. All these have to be solved. You can't have our ancient ancestors out there and they don't have an autonomic nervous system. When some lion comes after him, how's he going to run away? Well, he doesn't have a system that tells his heart to start beating faster. I think that's it, Steve.
All downhill from here.
Yeah. Steve's. So what I want to add here is this is why the life requires coherent interdependent systems. They're all dependent on each other. Okay.
So we're going to do a quick mic switch here. Green light. Is that good? This is the problem with telling people you're an engineer. It never goes well. What Howard's talking about here is this problem of cascading problems. So I'm just a lowly engineer. I'm a software guy. I don't really do hardware, so I had to do a lot of research in this book to kind of walk through all these issues. But I always approach problems from the perspective of an engineer. And if you are an engineer or you have to live with one, you understand the problems that engineers have. And those tend to be things like they never accept things at face value, and they always, and this is definitely true for me, I always see a problem and I ask myself, how would I solve that problem? If one of my clients said, Steve, I'll give you $1 million if you can solve this problem, I'm going to try to figure out how to solve that problem. It turns out, and the reason, Howard's been writing about this stuff forever, me not so long. The reason I love this stuff, in fact, I actually gave up my consulting business to go into this work, is because these problems are really interesting. The problems in life are way more interesting than the stuff I used to get paid to do. So when I come to a problem like this, I know you can't read that. It turns out I can't either. This is an older version. So in our book, we have a 2-page spread with this chart on it. And this shows you the set of problems that Howard was just describing. So I've got to get oxygen to every one of my 30-some trillion cells. So how do I do? Why do I need oxygen? Well, because oxygen's necessary for burning the sugars in your fundamental metabolism. You need oxygen to generate energy. So that's sort of the core fundamental problem. But I need to get oxygen to every cell. Well, most cells are on the interior, so they don't have access to oxygen in the air. So we just start going through these problems. So I need to get oxygen into my body. Okay, so I can maybe invent lungs. They're pretty cool. I'm probably not capable of actually inventing a lung, but I know someone who is. And then you just start walking through these problems, and you solve them one at a time, and then you pull the solutions to all those sub-problems together to make a solution to the overall problem. Well, it turns out that, I know you can't read this, but if you go through this, and I encourage you to buy a copy of the book just, for grins. It's actually pretty inexpensive and Howard and I make pennies. But anyway, so if you look at this, you go through it and you need muscles, you need muscle coordination, you need the gastrointestinal system, you need protein transcription and folding mechanisms, you need molecular machinery, you need cellular machinery. You go through all this stuff, and when you get done, you have a final solution to this problem, but you've touched almost everything in your body. So they're all dependent on each other. And at the end, you look at this and you say, I can't take anything away and still be alive. And like Howard said, I love, what if the materials problem in your body, what if isn't it odd that the only transparent tissue in your entire body is right on the optical axis of your eye? If you had transparent tissue back here, who wants to see your spleen? I don't even know where your spleen is, okay? It could be in my toe. I don't know. So I'm looking at this, and I'm going to kind of leave my slides behind because even I can't figure them out. So there are these create a set of causal hurdles, and I'm going to talk about this more. So maybe we could just put the book up there or something. I want to talk to you about what are the hardest problems in the universe. There's two. And I've never heard anyone talk about this way before. Do you know what they are? The devil's a hard problem. There are two in the universe of problem solving. There are two problems that are, if any human engineer could solve, would be the richest person in the world, and that is being alive and reproducing. And interestingly, those things are prerequisites for Darwin's theory. For Darwinism to work, the two hardest problems in the universe have to already be solved. This is, I've never heard anyone say that before, but it's absolutely true. So I'm just going to go through some problems. And I'm going to do this really fast because I want you to be really impressed with how exciting this is. And plus, we're going to run out of time. I got my timer running here. So you need enclosure. Your body, you have skin. Your organs are mostly in sacs. You have your gastrointestinal system, which is all enclosed from your mouth all the way through the exit. Because you can't just have chemicals floating randomly around in your body, especially if you eat something like the salad I had today, which is, a problem. So you want to isolate things. But you have to manage that. So you've got harvesting. How many chemicals do you have to keep your body running? We just talked about oxygen. Howard mentioned iron. You've got copper. You've got all kinds of sugars, proteins, fats. There's all this stuff you have to take in. You have to break those foods down into their constituent chemicals. And then you have to manufacture from those chemicals the things that your body needs. So that's like a factory to demanufacture food, and then another factory to turn the building blocks of your food into the things you actually need. Those are really hard things to do. You need transport and delivery. How do you move? How do you get the iron to your bone marrow, to the stem cells that are turning into red blood cells so they can make hemoglobin? And by the way, the red blood cells kick their nucleus out because they won't fit through the capillaries because they're too fat if the nucleus is in their cell. So they have to enucleate the cells. It's the only cell in your body that does that, as far as I know. And that's an amazingly hard problem. How do you take a cell and spit out the nucleus and keep everything else inside? That's a hard problem. You got lots of factories. You got wastes, recycling, and disposal. Some of us know more about this than others. But your body does an amazing job of recycling. If you're attacked by a nasty bacteria or virus, and your cell dies, it kills one of your cells, that cell will go to recycling. The parts of that cell will be used over again. That's absolutely amazing. You got supply chain management. For those of you who work in industry like me, supply chain management is a big deal. You got to get stuff from over there to over here. It may have to change forms 15 times. You got chemistry management. You have a lot of materials that you need, and you have to manage, and you need a control system for every one of them. Salt, sugars, various sugars, proteins, fat, oxygen, carbon dioxide, copper. There's even heavy metals that your body requires. Energy management. The only thing in your body that can generate energy and utilize energy is your cells. Every cell generates its own energy, and it consumes the energy that it creates internally, which is pretty cool. You got heat management. We all know, well, I live in Colorado, so that's why I'm in Florida. It's winter. So your body maintains a very strict temperature internally, no matter what the external temperature is. That's a hard problem. You actually have special capillaries in your skin that do nothing but open up when you're too warm to shuffle off more heat. You have materials problems. Where does the enamel in your teeth come from, and why is it only in your enamel on your teeth? I mean, if you had that kind of a deposit somewhere else, it would be, you'd rattle when you walk. You have structure, shape, and size. So, the joints. So my knees are causing problems these days. So, but you look at the knees, and they're absolutely perfectly designed. In fact, we have one of our colleagues is one of the leading mechanical engineers in the UK, and he's written a number of papers on how perfectly designed the human knee is. And that's a function of shape. Every one of the vertebra in your back has a unique shape, and it's an extremely complex three-dimensional shape. If it got that shape wrong, you would be crippled. Some of us, things go wrong, and we may have experienced some of these problems. So you have motion and strength. You have a muscle you have one set of muscles to extend your arm. You have a completely different set of muscles to withdraw your arm, right? So how can you do half of that? Everyone would be going around with their arms out. It'd be like the zombie apocalypse. And that turns out to be true for almost everything. You have a completely separate systems to speed up your heart rate versus slowing it down. It's like the brakes and the engine in your car. You have two different systems, one to accelerate, one to decelerate. There's huge fluid dynamics problems. You've got fluids, you got hydraulic pressure, getting blood to all the right places in your body. So, if you're exercising with your arm muscles need more blood, but your leg muscles don't. So how do you manage directing the right things to the right places at the right time? So there's defense. You have, everyone knows about this because of COVID. We know that there are invisible attackers trying to kill you, but your body also has viruses and bacteria that are beneficial to you. You have gut bacteria that help you digest your food. So how does your immune system know the good guys from the bad guys? Nobody knows these things. But it's a really interesting problem. You've got adaptations. So if you can't get your favorite foods, the foods your body processes most efficiently, but you can get other foods, your body will completely change your metabolic processes in order to take advantage of the foods that you have. And then when the right food, the food you like the best, your system likes most efficiently, it'll switch right back. So, and it happens very quickly. So you have optimization. Your body only makes things it needs where it needs them, when it needs them. The programming required for that for hundreds of things is mind-boggling. You have signaling and communication. There's many ways different parts of your body communicate with other parts. So we all know from communication that the sender of a signal and the receiver of the signal have to both understand what the signal means, or it's not communication. So how do you do that? There's chemical, hormonal signaling, there's electrical signaling, there's all kinds of stuff going on. You need coordination mechanisms. So how does when a child is developing in the womb, how does it know what order to build things? It builds out the body parts just when they're needed. So that's one of the reasons why premature babies, their lungs are the last thing they need. They don't need their lungs in the womb. So that's why premature babies are in such trouble. They need their lungs to function, but they're not fully developed yet. So you need, like Howard was talking about, physiological controls, blood pressure, blood temperature. You need logic and computation. Your body's filled with information. DNA is just information. It's just piles of information. You need to be able to process that information. You need to be able to store it and retrieve it. These are big problems. You need, and this is something I learned from Howard. All of the stuff that happens, almost, everything we've talked about so far here tonight is automated. It happens with no conscious thought. So why? Maybe so you can, otherwise you'd spend any time, let's see, what's my blood pressure? I need to raise that a little bit. How do I do that? So this allows you to focus on other things, to be a human, to have the human experience, to enjoy your food, to enjoy conversation with your wife or your children or your next door neighbor, argue about politics, the fun stuff in life. And interestingly, your body has a life cycle that's different from the cells in your body, right? So your blood cells replenish every few days. Your brain cells last your whole life. Different kinds of cells have different life cycles, but your body, the you who lives in your body, has a life cycle that's independent of those things. Now, I think that's pretty cool. Again, I've never heard anyone talk about that before. So, the core question for us tonight: what are our bodies trying to tell us? We're all trapped inside of a body. It's a blessing sometimes, and it's less of a blessing other times. The older we get, it seems like we kind of lean in the other direction. But maybe our bodies, I suspect that our bodies were made in a way that if we just stop and ponder it for a little bit, we will see the hand of the master engineer. And maybe one of the reasons most people don't want to think about that is they don't want to know about the answer. So I'm not going to go into this in any detail, but I want to just mention briefly that toward the end of our book, we take the lessons from the body, of which there are, 18 or 19 chapters. We go through all the body systems, and we take those lessons and we look at neo-Darwinism, which is the dominant explanation in education and politics and pretty much every facet of Western society. And we compare that to a new theory that we have proposed. We work with a group of engineers and medical practitioners and biologists on. We're developing a new theory of biological design, as Howard mentioned, and we compare those two theories against the data of the human body, we believe we've made a compelling argument that the dominant view of Darwinism not only fails to answer the questions that we ask, but it's categorically unable to do so. So when I was in high school, I had a buddy who had an old car. It was like an Oldsmobile or something. It was an absolute piece of junk. We called it the green limousine. You know, it's the kind of vehicle you buy in high school for $50. If it got above 40 miles an hour, the whole front end would shake. It was a death trap, you know. But, you know, we never took it on the highway because we knew we would die. But you can imagine taking the green limousine from where I grew up in Washington State. You can imagine driving that to New York. I mean, it might take you a couple of years, but it's doable, right? You cannot drive the green limousine to London. Okay, that's a category problem. That's not a quantity problem. That's a completely different kind of problem. So this is a green limousine kind of a problem. The only way you can build systems of the kind we see in the human body is through intentional action. Now, in our theory, I'll just give you the high-level view because my timer, I'm 18 seconds over. So this is going to be the really, really short version. So that's okay. I can go up to 50 seconds over. You're good. So the theory is that you need intentional actions to overcome these causal hurdles. How do you build interdependent systems where system A depends on system B depends on system A? That's like a chicken and egg problem, and those kind of problems are everywhere. In fact, we can't find any that aren't like that. So you can't build those gradually. So you need to overcome that causal hurdle. You need an intentional action. This is what engineers do. This iPhone, you see, and I'm now 1 minute in the red. This iPhone took a large number of engineers to design. It took hundreds of thousands of design hours from very smart people. It didn't accidentally happen, and it didn't happen gradually. So that's the theory is you need intentional actions. And so you create things with programs and parameters and capabilities, and then over time they organically grow. And when I started thinking about this a few years ago, it occurred to me, being a sometimes biblical scholar, that the notion of a garden is very biblical, and that's exactly the way humans describe how to design complex systems. So the human body is actually a set of systems of complex systems. And the way you design something like that is to create parts with rules and behaviors, and then you throw them together and see what happens. And it's like they organically grow over time. So I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards if you want to know more about that. But the reason this is an important question, I just want to spend a minute on this before I get Rabbi Jeff throws me off the stage. There is a fundamental question at the heart of our lives. Are you a cosmic accident made without purpose or intention, or were you intended? Were you made for a reason? Do you have purpose, or do you not have purpose? I don't believe there's any question before us as individual humans that's more important to the way we live our lives. So this is a question that needs to be grappled with. We all know that we send our kids off to college, and they may leave being faithful stewards of the Lord, and they come back a semester or 2 semesters later, and they're atheists. Right? You've seen this, right? Or your next door neighbor, this happened to your next door neighbor, and you're trying to figure out how do I talk to them? How do I help them to see what is so obvious to me that they don't seem to be able to see? And so we've tried in this book to give you a set of tools, which mostly consists of questions. So how do you create the kind of things that Howard was talking about? How do you do that gradually? Or is there a better way? And we try to propose a better way. So this question is the most important question in life, and we're trying to help people find their way to the answer that makes the most sense. In fact, it doesn't really make the most sense. It's the only answer that makes any sense. So that's what we want to leave you with. Teach you how to ask better questions, to think about this stuff, to be amazed at how cool you are. You may not have heard that before. And to help you help other people to make that same realization. So that's kind of why we're here, and we're hoping that this makes sense to you and that you can grasp this, especially for you if you're questioning these things. I know a lot of people go through their whole lives in the faith, and no one ever asks these questions. And so they come to believe that the church doesn't have any answers, and so they kind of drift away. They slowly leave, and because they just think there's no answers. So we think it's best to hit this head on. Let's go straight at it. Let's show what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, and help people to experience the life that they were made for, to see that they were intended, and to live in a way that, to live with intent. That's good. I'm going to write that down. I do this. I take notes. Our Frida, our publicist, told me to remember to wear pants every time you speak, and I did write that down. So that's all I have for you. If you have any questions, feel free to. We'll be around for a little while after we're done here. So.